touched base with both communities, and they're each doing very exciting things and frequently don't know about each other. So we like having hackerish academic things and academic hackerish things. So I was really pleased to see Sandy's submission come in on how to hack academia.
So how many of you are here today because you want some, oh, can you hear me? Am I on? No. All right, we'll try this one. How many of you are here today because you feel the need for credentials and you don't have them and you don't know how to get them? Good. How many of you are here because you're doing research, but you don't know how to get it published, you don't know how to get it recognized? Oh, so my own advisor says he doesn't know how to do it. And how many of you are here because the good drinking hasn't started yet? So that's what I thought. So I decided to give this talk for two reasons. And the first reason goes along with the fact that a lot of my hacker friends do this incredible work. And the work that I have seen is the equivalent of anything that I've seen in academia. But they don't have the credentials, so they're not getting the recognition, they're not getting the status, and they're not getting the money for it. And how do you get into this? If you don't get in, I mean, most of us don't fit the normal high school, college, grad school package. Have always been on the outside of the crowd. We've always been uncomfortable in the typical formalities or the typical rules that are in a normal high school, and frequently we drop out. And then how do you get back into the system? So that's one thing I'd like to address. The second reason that I wanted to give this talk is I've been to a number of HackerCons with hackers in academia talks, and they've always been great, but they always follow this one pattern. You get a group of PhDs up on a panel on stage, and some of them are professors, some of them are in industry, and they sit around and they swap stories about how great it is to be them, but they don't tell you how. So I am currently at the University of Pennsylvania working on a PhD, having gotten in through an unconventional, untraditional manner. And since I've been in the system, I've been observing the way it works from a systems hacker's perspective. I am a system hacker, that's what I do. And what I found is this impregnable one-way-in system is like any other system. It's got a lot of holes in it. And once you know what the holes are, you can learn how to manipulate them. So this, in true hacker tradition, I've learned this. I'm passing the information on to you. Consider it a how-to. So it really is in two folds. The first fold is if you want to get in and do a degree program, how do you, what are they looking for, and how do you make yourself fit in that? And the second is, how do you profit if you don't feel the need for the degrees, but you do want your research published? So there are slightly different strategies for the undergraduate level and the graduate level. And there's a slightly different strategy if you're young, early 20s, fresh out of high school and want to play this game, or if you're an adult coming back to school. A lot of the algorithm is the same, but some of it is different. We'll cover that. This is mostly US. I can tell you a tiny bit about Canada, but Render, hopefully for this time, will tell you a little bit more. And I can tell you an even teenier bit about the grad level at Cambridge, but those are the only things with which I have personal experience. Anything else, you got to find another oracle. Universities in the US, especially the top tier, the Ivy Plus, like to consider themselves Fortune 500 companies. They believe that they take in this raw material, however talented and pure this raw material is, and they apply their particular brand of magic to it, and they produce this product which they unleash on the world, and everything is better. In reality, these universities are not Fortune 500 companies, whatever the size of their endowments. What they really are ancient Greek city-states. Think Athens and Sparta. And just like Athens and Sparta, they are constantly at war, and they're at war with each other. And it's a war of status. These universities are trying to be considered number one, and status is determined by exclusivity. So what they want is to be able to admit the fewest number of applicants, and that as possible. That makes them more interesting or more desirable, so more people apply to them, so they get more applications to go through, and they get to reject even more people. And they're actually competing with each other. I mean, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, which are the top three. Penn and Caltech are tied for 5 right now. And this whole thing, they're all fighting with each other, maybe one step up or one step below. It's really, really interesting game. The other thing about US universities is that they all have their own particular feeling to them. If you've ever spent any time on these campuses, you would notice that Harvard feels nothing like MIT, and they're within walking distance of each other. Neither of them feel like Princeton, and Princeton doesn't feel like Penn, and they're 45 minutes away. So one of the main purposes of these universities in admitting students is to keep that particular feeling. They have a brand, they want to sell that brand, they want to enhance that brand. So how do you do this at the undergraduate level? In the US, undergraduate admissions is almost entirely anonymous. Almost. Yeah. Oh, you got it, right? Yeah. Look. This is what I'm learning to do, is write really obscure and unreadable papers. We're all familiar with the standard high school, very structured, itemized way of getting into college. Sometime in your junior year, you might meet once or twice with your public high school guidance counselor. You decide on a couple of colleges, you fill out the applications, you write the essays, you take your standardized tests, and sometime in the January of your senior year, you mail off this application, and then you sit and wait by the door for a fat envelope. On the academic side, it is just as structured. Last year, Penn got 21,000 applications for the freshman class, and they accepted about 3,500. And they accepted a lot more than Princeton and Harvard, who only accepted about 9%. Penn accepted, I think, 13% of their applicants. And that's a hell of a lot of applications to read. So the way that it's structured is that there is actually a dean of undergraduate admissions. And this dean has a number of full-time staff, and then there's a committee of faculty who all really don't want to be there. And their job is to go through every one of these applications and accept, reject. And so they've got to have a couple of filters. They've got to have a way to winnow this down. And they do it by standardized test scores, high school transcripts, your extracurricular activities, your essays, and your letters of recommendation. So your key to focus on to breaking this into this system is making your application stand out. Break that anonymity. So let's talk about how you do this. The first filter, and one of the really easiest ones to get by, is the standardized tests. The way to do this, and I promise you this works, is to take the Kaplan course or the Princeton Review course, pay the money, go to their little classes, do what the teacher says. They have hacked this test so well that if you follow their instructions, you will get a perfect score or a nearly perfect score. And the people you are competing against have done this. So if you don't do it, you will not be playing in a level playing field. Okay? But mind you, it works. And I did have the actual secret manual they give you to practice these little tricks in. The ones you buy, by the way, in the store have a little bit of the information, but not the full story. What they really do is give you a book of tricks. And I had the SAT version, but the employee who gave it to me made me promise not to sell it because you can get a couple hundred for it on eBay. And they didn't make me promise not to lend it, and so I lent it out and I don't have it back. But I do have the GRE one, and this was mine, and it works. So definitely you're welcome to come and look at this. That is the easiest way to get through. So the second is your high school transcript. If you're out of high school, there's not a hell of a lot you can do about this. And unfortunately, transcripts matter. You see, nearly everyone applying has a good SAT score. Harvard last year, 70% of the people applying had 750s across the board or above. You know, so at least they meet the minimum. About 70% meet the minimum qualifications right off the bat. So they check your transcripts. They are not looking to see whether you got straight A's. What they're looking to see is the first idea of who you are and what kind of a person you are. By what kind, I mean, what are you interested in? So they're looking to see what classes you took. They're comparing that against the classes that were available at your high school. And they're looking to see what you did in those classes. So, but if you're out of high school at this point, there's not much you can do. If you are an adult wanting to return back to school, this doesn't matter. Your high school transcript is not nearly as important as your work and your experience. So, the third thing is your essays. And yes, they read everyone. This is a quote from one of the admissions officers at Yale. We look at every essay for every applicant, and for students who reach the level of serious consideration, essays may end up being read multiple times. So you're talking about 15, 18,000 essays. And so how do you make your essay stand out? Most of the essays they get read like this. The person I most want to have dinner with is Abraham Lincoln because. If I could change the world in 3 days, I would do this. Don't do that. This is one of the first places where your hacker credentials can make a huge difference for you. Write about something that you've done in the hacker world, some experience that you've had in the hacker world. Answer the question they're asking, but do it in such a way that it is personalized and it lets them know about you. What they're trying to find out is, what is the unique characteristic about you that would make you fit in and enhance their particular brand? So you're going to sell yourself here. If you're not a good writer, there are a number of things that are available that check your local community colleges for someone to help you write. There's also, In Like Me is a good place, and Ivy Success is a good place to find people who are used to getting people in. Ivy Success, by the way, depending on, has different scales for how much you want to pay, but they pretty much, they'll do as much as they can to guarantee your acceptance. Diversity is interesting here. I was having coffee with the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Princeton once, and he told me he had just admitted a new student. This student's SAT scores were marginal. Their GPA wasn't great, but they had one thing that made them different. This person did Irish step dancing at a national level. In other words, river dance. And that meant Princeton wanted them. They were different. So how different are hackers? Mind you, there are a lot of people at the conferences, but we're a tiny percentage of the world, and the stuff we do is interesting. It's fun. It's exciting. In addition to the essays, there's your extracurricular activities, of which this is one. Get involved in the hacker spaces. Hack DC, the Hacktory in Philly. Penn just put out last month an email requesting anyone who wanted to, or who could, to please get involved and help judge the middle school Lego Robotics Championships. That's fun. Go to your local middle schools or high schools and offer to teach an hour after school class on how to do something, how to program a microcontroller. All of this not only tells the admissions officers that this is the kind of thing you're interested in, but this is the kind of thing you're interested in doing service in. This is how you benefit the community. And that looks really good. So, and the last thing that really matters is your letters of recommendation. So think carefully about the people you want to get to recommend you. Most incoming applications are from their high school guidance counselors, and they almost always write the same form letter. So use your connections, socially engineer your way, and get good, interesting letters of recommendation. Now,
should they be current? Like if you're going back, you should get
yes, you want ones that describe who you are now. So remember I said that
It's uncouth to just ask the party, can you read the letter before they send it? What is the social standing, and what is the general stigma for or against that?
Matt, you want to answer that one since you're on the professor's side?
Writing a letter, if you can read it, it puts a lot of pressure on them. You know?
To-
I usually have them send a copy, and after I know it's
So-
an event, then I read it because I'm curious.
Maybe not. So remember I said that undergrad admissions is almost entirely anonymous. Well, there are two areas where it isn't. The first is in the case of athletes, which looking at our audience doesn't really apply here. The second one is legacy. Now, legacies are kids whose parents have gone to that university and their grandparents went to that university, or they're kids of famous people or powerful politicians, or they have lots and lots and lots of money, and they have this way in. So of the admitting freshmen at Penn last year, I think 130 were legacies, something like that. But there is a way to make this work for you. There's a trick, and you can do it. You see, most of these really rich kids attend very well-known, very highly credited prep schools. And these prep schools have highly paid, very professional guidance counselors who know every one of the undergraduate admissions by name. They have coffee with them. They take them out to dinner. They call them on the phone regularly. But one of Princeton's undergraduate admissions people told me that that apparently public high school guidance counselors don't know that you can talk to admissions officials at universities. The biggest surprise for me was the difference in how much more contact private school guidance counselors had with admissions officers versus the public schools. I went back to my own public high school, and the guidance counselor asked, would it be okay for me to contact you regarding a student? I couldn't believe he was asking. That's commonplace among the private school counselors or the affluent suburban high schools. So, how do you make this work if you're not a rich kid with rich parents? Be your own guidance counselor. These people's names and info, contact info, is available on the university websites. Get it. Contact them. Find out what they're looking for. Keep contacting them. What you have to do is you have to break the anonymity. So you have to get them to know, and what you're going to do here is you're going to socially engineer by convincing them that you are a good fit for their school. And once you do that, it's how people get in by somebody's word saying, yes, we want him, no, we don't want her. That's how it's done. And that's how you play it. So what if you're an adult going back to school? There are some surprisingly very little known holes. Did you know that Harvard, Penn, Columbia, and Brown all have working adult programs? I was completely unaware of this, and I've been working for Princeton for 15 years. The stuff is available. They have a much higher acceptance rate. And in the case of the state schools, the good state schools, they have programs set up that are specifically geared to give you credit for your experience. So find out, go look at our sites, get in contact with these people, set up a personal conversation with them, and they will help you because they have all the tools at their disposal, and they really do want you. It adds to their diversity. And so it's something that they're looking for. So I didn't even know that existed. So now that pretty much is undergrad. The only one more thing about undergrad is how do you pay for it? And it's different at the Ivy Plus than it is anywhere else, because the top schools actually have these huge endowments, and at least for the past 6 years that I know of, students who make under a certain amount or whose parents make under a certain amount, and I think it's about 100,000 now. It was 72,000 when it started. Go for free for 4 years, period. They have a need-blind acceptance, which means that if they accept you, they will give you the financial package you need to get you through. And they've been trying for the past 7 or 8 years to reduce the school loan load on their graduates. They don't. It costs what, $30,000, $40,000 for to go to Penn right now, and they don't want you graduating 4 years later with $200,000 in debt. So there are programs. Some of it might be work study, some of it may be loans, but a lot of it is going to be grants or plain flat out free tuition. So let's move on to.
Sometimes it can actually be cheaper to go to a more expensive school than to try to go to a school that's, oh, well, I can't afford that, so I'll go here. And then you find out that's actually a lot more expensive to go here, because if you tried there, you would have gotten the money.
And that's really one of the things that is causing a bit of controversy, because the good second-tier schools, and there are a lot of really excellent second-tier schools that are just of the same educational quality, don't have the endowments, and they can't do that, and they're losing some of the kids that they would otherwise have. So there's a lot of infighting going on in this whole status game again. So, what about grad school? Should you get a master's degree? Yeah, you should. And yours is actually the easiest road to hoe. In the US, even at the top tier schools with lots and lots of money, the master's degree programs are looked upon as revenue sources. So there isn't the same limit on students that they will accept, except for how many chairs they can put a body in. So if you can pass the minimum filters, which are your GRE, you should have a decent transcript, but sometimes that's get aroundable, your letters of recommendation, and your mission statement. And your mission statement is an essay that you write that explains why you want to go to grad school. So basically, what you want to take me as a student because I want to study this, and this is how it's going to benefit the humanity and your university. So how do you do the GRE? This is how you do the GRE. It worked for me. And I have severe, by the way, I'll talk to you about this offline, but I have severe test anxiety. I know the stuff cold, and I blank out when I take an exam, and this works. So it is still pretty anonymous at the master's degree level, but your chances of getting in are much greater. So I'd say definitely go for it. So what about the PhD? Should you get a PhD? Probably not. The only reason that you get a PhD, there, by the way, is like 5 years of PhD comics, and they're utterly true. So the only reason you get a PhD is if you can't do what you want without it. It's not that getting a PhD is hard. This is one of the most overrated things in the world. And this is from someone who has desired one so much that I'm finally doing this as an adult now. It's basically a couple of papers that you've written on a particular subject with a thesis statement stuck on top, stapled together and handed in. That's all your dissertation is. It's not hard to do. The problem is that you have to spend a lot of years doing grudge and grunt work, and basically you're going to spend a lot more time being poor than you would if you got your master's and went out and worked. By the way, you do not need a master's for a PhD. You usually are given one anyway. By the time you finish your core work in PhD, you have enough for a master's, and they usually just give it to you. The qualifications for a PhD are different, and the mentality for a PhD is different. Only do this if that's what you really, really want to do, because you end up being an indentured servant for a considerable amount of time. And then if you want to fight the tenure track, it's even harder. There's another 15 years of your life before you're secure. So why do all the rules change? So this was a survey in 1999, and professors spend very little of their time doing research. They do spend a considerable amount of time teaching, but they spend a lot of their time thinking up ideas and writing grant proposals to fund them. And that leaves pretty much no time at all to research the ideas they got the money to fund. So included in those grant proposals is enough money to hire a research assistant to do this for you. And PhD students are hired by their advisors. And I can speak from personal experience here, they're not hired for very much. You end up sort of an underpaid lab flunky. But it is, there are benefits from it. Because it's the professor's grant money that pays for these students, this is not at all anonymous. It is always as close to one-to-one as the professors can make it. And here's why. At the PhD level, academia is the most successful self-perpetuating pyramid scheme you've ever encountered. And the reason why is because The incoming PhDs and especially after they've finished their quals and are doing nothing but research, do a lot of work. Some of it is their own ideas, and some of it's their professors' ideas, and attempt to publish and publish and publish. And everybody up the line from them gets their names on the paper and benefits from the work that they do. So, like a pyramid scheme, the people at the top benefit from the work that the people at the bottom do. It's a successful pyramid scheme because the people at the bottom also benefit. Your advisor teaches you how to play this game. Your advisor introduces you to everyone you need to know to help your career. Together, if you're lucky, you come up with a really interesting, a really unique idea, and together you may change the world. So it benefits both sides. But the way that the game is usually done is professors like to teach undergrad classes. They don't like to teach the graduate level classes because we're all creeps. And we do the minimum amount possible, and we don't have any intellectual curiosity in the areas that are not in our research, and we're just a big drag on the professor's time. But they love teaching the undergrad classes, and they're looking for stars. They're looking for those bright kids that really have ideas, that are really creative and energetic and want to learn. And those kids they nurture. They find them, they take them under their wing, they get them on the PhD assembly line, and by the time they're juniors, they're doing original research. They've probably been to conferences. By the time they're seniors, these professors call up their various friends. And mind you, the PhD community, while computer science is much larger, we'll talk about this in a second, they pretty much know each other at each levels. So when they've got a bright star, they'll let their friends know. Oh, you've got a position for a new PhD candidate? I've got a kid you got to look at. So, Matt, you want to talk about this because we just did our admissions at Penn. Yeah, let me give you an actual advisor for a second.
So I should, I'm Matt. I should, I don't know anything, I'm hearing for the first time how undergraduate admissions work. I mean, I know there are undergraduate admissions people at Penn, but I have this horrible fear that if I talk to them, they're going to ask me to do something. So I'm learning that stuff absolutely for the first time, so I can't give you any advice about that. But I do want to echo something that Sandy said, which is that PhD admissions is a very, very different thing. It's very much true in the case of PhD level admissions, at least in computer science departments that I've been involved with. The back door is considerably wider than the front door. The veneer is that this is admitting students, and it looks sort of the application form to come looks an awful lot like a college application form, and it asks you for all of the same kinds of things. But in fact, when we talk about admissions, we talk about hiring. Right. I mean, we fund all of our PhD students. They get paid a stipend. They don't pay tuition. So in order to bring in, and this is, by the way, true at pretty much all research-oriented schools in the United States. In order to bring in a PhD student and pay them a kind of starvation wage, I think our stipend's about $25,000 a year. Yeah, yeah. No, actually, no, we're not the lowest. That's it's in Philadelphia. Yeah, I mean, you can do that. There's soup kitchens. It's possible. Excellent shelter. Yeah.
If you publish, it takes you out to dinner.
Yeah. So, in order to bring you in and pay you a kind of starvation wage, I have to raise just to cover the cost plus overhead. I have to raise about $70,000 a year in grant money to do that per year per person. because universities are way better than administrators are way better than professors at stealing. So there are all these kind of internal taxes that you have to pay. There's something called overhead, which you learn about as soon as you become an academic. Which wow, I just got $300,000, and it turns out to be worth less than half of that in terms of what you can actually spend. And then there are benefits, although that we have to pay for. So the bottom line is the cost in grant money is about $70,000 a year. Now, it's hard to get research grants. NSF, the National Science Foundation, which is probably the biggest agency that funds computer science research in the United States, typically awards 3-year grants. By the way, it takes 5 years to get a PhD. Typically awards 3-year grants. The success rate is about 8%, so which means that on average you have to fill out about 10. You have to do about 10 grant proposals to get one funded, and the typical amount of a 3-year grant per professor is going to be about $250,000. So essentially, in order to bring in one PhD student and be comfortable that I can pay for them per career, I'm essentially writing about 20 grant proposals per student, in order to have the kind of expectation of being able to fund them. So it's expensive, and then there's lab equipment and travel and all of that kind of stuff, conferences and all of that kind of stuff, which also have to come out of that. So it's very, very expensive in terms of time to bring in a grad student. So we're really thinking of grad students essentially as junior faculty members. We expect students to come in and do research. So I really, really don't want to admit people who don't want to be there. And so what I'm looking for are people who want to be like me. And
When I grow up, I'm going to
yeah, and who think that the kind of work that I do is the kind of work they do, and every professor is looking essentially for that. So the first thing you have to realize when you're applying to graduate school is you don't want to apply to a school, you want to apply to a faculty member.
Hold on, you're giving my talk.
Oh, sorry.
So my turn. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, I got some other things I want to disagree with you about, though.
Oh, thanks a lot. Which is also the key to academia, is the disagreeing. If they disagree, they like you. So what Matt essentially said is that he is very heavily invested in the students that he picks, and so is every professor. So so it's personal because they got to get the best bang for the buck. So my story. I had a chance to get in the easy way, and I blew it. When I was 16 years old, the dean of the local math department at my local university offered me the chance to enroll that minute, get out of school in 2 years, and out of state to grad school, and I turned it down. It was I think, one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I thought, okay, this is easy. I can do this. I'm smart. I wanted to learn to surf. I wanted to bum around Europe for a while. I'll do this when I'm ready. Every single time I tried to do this, and I applied over and over and over again, and I had a decent GRE and I had a decent transcript, failed every single time. I got accepted only by one university that I wasn't really interested in, and I didn't want to study with that person, and I even went so far as to take a job at one of the Ivy League universities, a very low-paying sysadmin job, in order to try and sideways matriculate, because most universities actually let their staff go to school for free. Turns out I picked one of the only Ivies that does not allow. So even that was an epic fail, and I gave up. But this has always been the dream. This is what I wanted. I've always seen myself doing research, surrounded in the lab, lots of computers, lots of machines, lots of things blowing up. And so I thought, well, if I can't have it for real, I'll just have it a little bit. So I was at Princeton, and I began attending Ed Felton's weekly seminars. He has an IP policy group, and he was advertising the seminars, and it turns out they're open to everybody. It turns out they also serve free lunch. And you go to these, the only people there are other academics, really other students. Nobody really knows that they exist. And because I never can sit still and be quiet anyway, I began participating, asking questions, making comments. And so then I thought, well, why not try the academic conferences? So went to a few conferences and schmoozed and met people, and it turns out that academic conferences, well, not as much drinking goes on, are quite... See what I mean? Well, I haven't made crypto yet. Are very, very similar in nature to HackerCons. And what you've got is a group of people who are interested in certain subjects, and you go and hang out with those people, and new people are always welcome. You can... The first time I got to go out to dinner with people like Steve Bellevin and Peter Neumann, and that was just like, I'm not worthy. The amazing thing, but it was just being part of a group the same as being at a HackerCon. And it was when those people began saying to me, where are you teaching? Where'd you get your PhD? And I'd have to say to them, I don't have one. I couldn't get in. And they said, what do you mean? You know, Matt and I had crossed at Princeton years ago when he was still a student, but some of our mutual friends kind of got us back together and said, you know, here's somebody you might be interested. She's a hacker. You're a hacker. Maybe you might want to take this person on as a student. And I really didn't think it was possible. Absolutely, my mind, I thought that there was only one way in, and I had failed. And it took a lot of convincing of a lot of my academic friends that not only was it possible for me to get in, but that I would be good enough to do this. I thought it was a lot harder than it is. There were a few things I had to do, like get through Herstein's algebra book on my own. Thanks a lot. But the real way to get in is to pretend that you already are. This is exactly what you do when you're pen testing. You find out all the information that you possibly can. So how to get into a PhD program? Find out all the information that you possibly can about the people that are working in the area you want to do research in. Once you have that information, you contact them. You contact them at conferences. You contact them through email. You don't want to, if you're going to email contact, read their papers. Everything's up on Google Scholar. Find out what they've done. You should be doing this anyway for your own research. You should be finding out on the other work in the area. Contact them with questions, with ideas, and then just hang with them at conferences, and then convince them that they would benefit by taking you on as a student. A number of current professors have told me that they would actually be interested in taking hackers as students, but they really don't know how to meet any. This is a foreign country. I mean, we are like mutants, and they're a little bit afraid. Yeah, convince them that you won't hurt them, and they might actually take a chance on you. So, hold on. We're going to. This applies both to hackers who want degrees and to hackers who would like to benefit from the academic system without having to actually enroll and matriculate in a degree granting program. The work that a lot of you people are doing here is research. It is as good as some of the stuff, and some of it's crap, but a lot of it is as good as any of the research I've ever seen, but the way you present it and the way you sell it isn't. For one thing, hackers never check their references. You're not familiar with any of the work that anybody else does. Frequently you'll put something out and that somebody else is already working on, and have no idea that somebody else is already working on it. One of the things that makes an academic paper publishable is that it refers to a lot of other academic papers that have done really good work. And So you need to show that you're familiar with them. The second thing you have to do is demonstrate that not only are you familiar with other work, but that your work is different, and here's why. So hacker white papers never show any previous work, but an academic paper is never without it. A paragraph or two saying, here is the current research in this area, here so-and-so has done this, and while this is interesting, mine is different because, and mine enhances the field because. So that's absolutely essential. And the other thing that, the third thing, is that when academics can propose a fix for something, they do. Hackers rarely do that. They say, this is broken, ha ha ha. And I'm smarter than you, didn't I find it? Yes, you are smarter than us, but still. So one of the things that really benefits and makes a paper interesting and useful are if you can come up with a model for improving the system. Because then someone else can expound on your research and maybe make that model for you or co-work with you on something. Very, very rarely. This might have been true back in the 90s or so, but it doesn't happen anymore. You will not see a computer science research paper that doesn't have at least 4 names on it. I have seen as many as 11. Almost all work now is being done with co-authors and collaboratively with people all over the world, because the field is now, so I would say that computer science as a field is now in its teenagerhood. It's beginning to figure out who it is and to separate into its separate interests. It used to be all one big combined thing, which was Usenix Tech, and now there are hundreds of small conferences. There are conferences for programming language people, conferences for architects, conferences for security, and there's very little crossover except in certain areas. But often if you're working on something, you need the expertise that you don't have, so you collaborate, and everybody benefits from it. It doesn't matter whether your name is first, in the middle, or last. If your name's on the paper, you have exactly the same credit as anybody else does. So that. And then the last thing that is essential to an academic paper is peer review. You submit a paper to a conference or to a journal, and it gets handed out to a group of people who are in your area. And because they're in your area, they're constantly competing with you. So they're looking for whatever flaws that they can find. As a matter of fact, you actually have to say there's a conflict of interest if you have friends on the programming committee, on the paper review committees. So they're not allowed to read your paper. The people who hate you are the ones who read your papers. And you can also, by the way, get a great deal of benefit by looking at other people's work and saying, I can attack this way, or this is wrong because. That's also publishable. So the way to break into this is to get a co-author. If you're interested in something that our group is interested in, come and talk to us. We'll collaborate with you. And if you go the conference route and you start talking to people and meeting and schmoozing, you're going to find people with whom to collaborate. So you want a co-author, and that's your key to getting published. The other thing that you can do is benefit financially from conferences. All of the major conferences now have tutorial tracts. And the tutorial tracks are not taught by these professors or the conference attendees who regularly taught. They're taught by us. Guest speakers, invited talks. Dan and Roger are very good at this, and I've seen them at a number of conferences. The new tutorials. Last year, I had this weird, surreal moment because my hacker world and my academic world collided when I met Bruce Potter in the hallway at Usenix Security. And the crossover between academia and hackerdom is like my mission in life. And it was wonderful to see. But these are just a list of a few of the people or groups that I'm sure you recognize who are now getting paid decent money to run a tutorial. The 2 links on here give you what they're looking for. Come up with something a decent preparation, maybe for 1 day or for 3 days, and you might have a job. So, yeah.
Having the music the way calling security back, they desperately need people like this stuff with Shmoocon. It was really weak this year, but you guys have plenty of great existing ideas. I wholeheartedly submit.
Oh, fantastic.
Really fresh stuff.
Come get some truffles for that. So, all right, people. So write this up. There's a template for how to do this. Also, Bruce gave me his last year's submission. What he was trying to do, his submission, his training proposal. So if you'd like to take a look at that, I'll see if we can get them to put it up online with the slides. Okay? And there was one thing that I had asked you about telling, what Alma had told you. Would you relate that story? Sure. This relates to crossing over and the need to get more hackers into academia.
I was at a conference last summer with Alma Witten, and I was talking with her in the hallway, and she is one of the pioneers of usability and security. She runs a security group at Google, and she had been going to a number of events that were about getting women more involved in tech and in academia, and she said that one of the things that she was feeling that she needed to do was to be something of an iconoclast, because a lot of the advice that women are given is find yourself a mentor, do this, do that, here's the right way to do things. And the flip side of that argument is essentially there's only one way to do it. Whereas she had essentially dropped out of college, gone and been a biker chick, done some art, done this, that, and the other thing, and sort of stumbled her way back into academia. And similarly to what Sandy's saying, she found that stumbling in was actually a lot easier than getting in the first place. So she has been trying to say, while this is good advice, you also want to consider the alternate routes, because the alternate routes may actually be better routes for you, and it might be better for you. I mean, I don't think that what you did was exactly the wrong thing to do. I think that you took an alternate path that might have been an interesting one. If you'd become a 21-year-old person with a master's degree and a PhD by 24, you would be a different person, and you know, maybe a little more academic, but also a little less hackerish.
Anyway, so that's my talk. We'll take questions, but Matt wanted to say something. You see why I studied with him?
Yeah, so yeah, no, I just want to actually just emphasize something you said. Does anybody remember the great lie in high school about your permanent record? Yeah. You know, that turns out the truth is, what have you done for me lately, right? Do something interesting, and that makes you interesting right now, right? And that's way, way more important. I'm a high school dropout. No one cares, right? It doesn't matter. I stumbled my way back into college, decided I wanted to be one of the professors there, and now I am. That works. The back door is wider than the front door, and the trick is just figure out how to start acting like the thing you want to be. And the world is a pretty hostile place, but it's also more forgiving than it lets on about certain things. And I think with respect to academia, it's real important to keep that in mind.
Thanks, bud. So, questions? Steve first. Steve?
Hey, so when can I start calling you Dr. Mouth?
Oh, it's going to take me a while. Because I'm doing it the way that I am, coming back as an adult, I'm actually going part-time. So it's going to take me about twice as long as everybody else. But you can call me that anyway.
You should give us a call again and just replace the word stupid with manager. Or executive.
How about overlord?
Right.
Yeah. But,
I have a number of questions. One, what if learning disability and papers are really hell for you?
say again?
What if, you have a learning disability and papers are hell for you?
Oh, so the question was, what if you have a learning disability and papers are really hell? You get a co-author. The ideas matter, and you get someone to help you learn to write to learn to write it. And the interesting thing is that the good professors.
Writer, it's just writing part. I'm thinking more like if you're doing the college route, because that's one of the reasons why I never thought to go back That's one of the reasons I never thought to going back to getting my bachelor's, because I mean, it's like just the writing. The writing would just kill me. I mean, I'm fine with like 8 hours of classes and 2 hours of homework, but 2 hours of class and 8 hours of homework, no, it doesn't work.
There are actually a lot of programs. Penn has this fantastic learning center that I'm dealing with right now. Remember I told you I have severe test anxiety? If you give me a verbal exam and I can talk to you, I can get through everything. If you put me in a high pressure situation, I can't. I freeze. And Penn actually has an entire program. They just sent me to the Learning Center. The Learning Center is working with me. I'm getting counseling. I'm speaking to a couple of doctors. They may give me, depending on what the tests show, I might get extended time on exams, or I might get different sort of preparation. So the schools
They
actually
really
have
will
a
work
whole
with
system.
you.
to work
Also,
with students.
how much does this apply to if you want to do this, but you don't want to go into the computer field? What if, like, you're a hacker, but what you really want to study is, XYZ?
I don't know. I do know that at the grad level, liberal arts is really different. CS is kind of unique because it's a very young field, and consequently, it's very much reputation dependent. So all of the professors, I started to talk about this and got sidetracked. Really, everybody in the security field knows each other. For one thing, they were all at AT&T Bell Labs together. They held reunions every year. So they trust each other's recommendations and each other's opinions. So when they're looking for students, for example, and they have a space, they'll actually send queries out to their friends and acquaintances. So, but I don't know if that works for liberal arts.
And my last question was, you mentioned about if you want to not go back to school but still get involved in academia, but you didn't really touch on that much. What do you got?
You got to get a co-author.
Okay.
Find one. Bus. The two
That's
ways
in
to do it-
academia
The two ways
already.
are either two. Yes, that's in academia. You just want to play both sides.
I'd be happy to have other people show up and meet the people. It's like, yeah, going to conferences, starting to read papers, corresponding with people, and suggesting that you work with them is a good way for lots of people, but to get involved.
See, good creative energy is hard to find, and when you find it, what comes out of it is so much better than what went in. So, if you've got some good creative ideas, tell them to someone who's working in that field, and they would love to work with you.
Yeah, I'll just take issue with one of your suggestions is the order of authors matters. So just piling your name in on a 11 author paper doesn't get you a whole lot, especially when you're like me and you're in front of a 10-year review committee who wants to see primary authorship in journals, peer-reviewed journals. So
Yeah. So I just want to point out, in a lot of places, we go by kind of a strict authorship rule of alphabetical, right? And to some extent, as someone named Blaze, I kind of like that rule. What's really more important is that you're recognized as having primacy for the paper. For both grad admissions and tenure, what really, really, really matters is the letters. That people say, this guy wrote this fundamentally great paper. And it may have zillions of authors, but you have to get in front of that paper and get recognized as having primacy for the ideas, and that's real important for tenure.
It doesn't matter if your name is first. It matters if you talk about it a lot and people know that you did it. That's essentially what he's saying. My name isn't first on the voting paper, but a lot of people in the academic world see me as the face of Penn's voting. And that's only because I talk a lot. Yeah.
One thing on that previous point too, it really helps if you're a student at conferences that have a prize for the best student paper.
Oh, yeah.
Because that way you can go ahead and get your name on first without the huge fight with your professor there. So.
And interestingly, the conferences now have all of these additional workshops. So if you don't get into the main conference, you can get into one of the 2-day workshops that are before them, like e-voting or HotSec, which is new ideas in security, or WOOT, which is the new offensive security, there's about 11 of them that are tied to just one conference, and that's other avenues in which to submit.
You briefly touched on PhD programs and how if you go into a PhD program, you automatically get your master's. You mind briefly touching on about how a lot of schools have gotten rid of master's programs as a whole, and either either you're done after your bachelor's or you go on to get your PhD. You don't. There's really no option of getting your master's in some places.
Oh, really? I actually wasn't aware of that, because most of the universities I'm familiar with do have master's programs, and they admit a lot of students, and then just get them right out of the door. It really is a revenue-generating source for the university. But it really is inapplicable. It's irrelevant for a master's. For a PhD, because doing the work for your PhD is the same as the work for your master's plus.
I like to comment that a lot of institutions are now doing professional masters, and they give an academic master's for people on the PhD track, and then you can go and get basically a professional master's is geared for people who
Want to go out in industry. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. Yep. We actually have a number of students in our master's programs at Penn that are co-mastering with the Wharton Business School. They intend to go out and help our failing economy, or maybe just contribute to it. I'm not sure. But the difference with the academic masters and the professional masters is that the academic masters requires a thesis, which is like a mini dissertation. The professional doesn't. It's almost always just coursework. Attend the classes and pass your exams, and that's it. So. Yes. Yep. Yeah. That's good. That's.
So basically, the one skill that's found helpful in all these fields is schmooze your way in.
It's all social engineering, and we're good at that. So, all right, one more question.
I got back to Raleigh when I studied too, and I did a serious amount of social engineering over an incredible broad span of colleges, trying to find one that had what I want. And part of it was finding college that had the courses I wanted to have, that had actually taught them in the last 4 years. They can carry a course on the books for 9 years before ACM will say, excuse, you haven't taught it. And that's for the computer science area. So it was a matter of confirming. They actually were going to teach the courses I wanted. And I only found 4. And then I went and actually looked and talked to the students on this campus. And I deliberately was talking to the seniors and juniors. I let them know I was going to be coming in as a freshman, so they didn't think I was competing with them. So I could get the lowdown of how did the campus treat them. And one of the colleges I talked to, the seniors and juniors told me explicitly that the way they scheduled the courses, there was no way to get through there in 4 years. You had to do it in 5, because they would schedule the one you needed not to occur except every 5th year. And just, you had to be aware of that. The school promised you scholarships for 4 years. You had to start paying back the 5th, and you hadn't graduated yet. So that was one of the schools I didn't go to. They may have changed their policy, so I'm not going to mention it because it's been many years since I was there. But you can social engineer. You've got the internet. You've got friends. Your friends have got friends. You can find out about the schools. Who's got what you want? You can go online and get course information. I couldn't. I had to write letters to get what I wanted to know at that time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Comments?
Bachelor's level, something that thank you. Something that I'm running into right now is how do you engineer otherwise skip the time wasting classes? I know this already. I don't want to take this class.
I'll tell you how to do this because I did this as an undergraduate. You go to the professor who is teaching the course that you want to take, and you say, I'm interested in your course and I want to know whether or not the prerequisite is a maturity requirement or if I'm actually going to need to know the content. In general, they're so delighted that somebody wants to take their course that they will say, you don't really need to do that, or they will say something like, you can come by and I'll teach it to you in 3 hours. Which in many cases is really what you need. You need to know the 5 salient points that they're really going to be building on. But show an interest and talk to the person who's teaching the course and ask them if you can come. I was never denied going into a course by skipping the prerequisites.
Can I expand on that and tell you that if you jackass, go over them, go to the dean, work the system. You can always get a waiver on an undergraduate course. You can take a graduate course once you get your graduate credit and then waiver the undergraduate course. There's always ways around an undergraduate course. Don't ever take no for an answer.
The key thing I found when I was doing that was I would go and say, I don't want to be given a waiver on the course. I want to take a different course instead of. I want to broaden my knowledge, not just take whatever I know. And I usually was able to get my advisor to tell me which instructor I had to talk to make that happen. On the bit about, you can avoid jackasses, by the way. Go talk to other students, find out who they want to be in class with, and go for those instructors. It really improves the quality of the class that you're taking when the instructor's something you want.
Never take a class from a jackass.
No, I never did.
Just never take a class.
We've got one more question. But for,
I was in the military, I was in the Navy. While I was in the Navy, a lot of courses require examination clerk test. So if you have a test, you mean they have a class and they have a clerk, many colleges accept credit by examination.
that's an excellent point. And in the case of the graduate side, you're not required to take any classes. You're required to pass your general qualification exams. So if you already know the material, you do not have to take the class. You just attend. They have a class specifically designed, around the test, but you can just take the test.